My name is Norma. I'm standing in my mother's dining room, surrounded by family, but the air is thick with tension. The moment I've been waiting for, and dreading, has finally arrived. I'm 22 weeks pregnant, and I've just announced it at my mother's 68th birthday dinner. My mother, a cold and controlling woman named Victoria, looks me straight in the eye and says, "Let's hope this one doesn't inherit your pathetic weakness." My father, Henry, a man who has always been overshadowed by my mother, sneers and adds, "Let's hope you don't mess this up, too. You're good at nothing." I feel a knot in my stomach, but I'm not going to let them break me this time. I reach into my bag and pull out the letter from my obstetrician, Dr. Sullivan. As I start reading, I can see the color draining from my mother's face. It all started when I was a child. I was always a delicate girl, bruising easily and getting tired quickly. My mother would constantly compare me to my older sister, Amelia, who was the perfect child in her eyes. Amelia was athletic, smart, and confident, while I was always the shy one, afraid to speak up. One day, when I was 6, I fell off my bike and scraped my knee. The cut wasn't deep, but the bruise that followed was huge. My mother folded a napkin and pressed it to my knee, telling me to stop crying because Amelia had once broken her arm and didn't make a fuss. She then framed the napkin and hung it on the dining room wall, a constant reminder of my so-called weakness. As I grew older, my mother's words became more and more hurtful. She would call me dramatic, sensitive, and soft. By the time I was 14, she would say things like, "Norma, the world doesn't care about your feelings." I met my husband, Leo, at a local bookstore. He was a kind-hearted software engineer who listened more than he spoke. When my mother met him for the first time, she warned him that I was the delicate one and he should be patient. But Leo just smiled and said, "I think she's careful, and that's a good thing." We got married when I was 29, and we decided to start a family a year later. My mother was skeptical from the start. "Don't get your hopes up," she said. "Your body has never been reliable." For 5 long years, we went through the hell of infertility. We spent over $75,000 on 3 rounds of IVF. In 2023, I lost my first baby at 10 weeks, and in 2025, I lost the second at 12 weeks. After each loss, my mother had a different way of making me feel worse. "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers," she said after the first loss. "Maybe your body is trying to tell you something," she said after the second. After the second loss, my mother sent me a package. Inside was an oatmeal-colored cashmere cardigan and a note that said, "For when you finally give up." I didn't open it for months. When I did, Leo stood in the doorway and said, "You don't have to wear it. You can do whatever you want with it." I put it in the bottom drawer of my dresser. In 2026, a nurse I worked with in pediatrics recommended Dr. Sullivan. She said that my previous OB should have ordered a hematology panel after the first miscarriage. Dr. Sullivan's office was painted a soft mint green, with a small fern in the corner and a diploma from Stanford on the wall. She read my chart for a long time before looking up and saying, "Norma, I think we should run an antiphospholipid panel. Your history of bruising and these unexplained losses are concerning. Your previous doctor should have done this years ago." I asked her what antiphospholipid syndrome was. She explained that it was an autoimmune disorder where my immune system was making antibodies that caused my blood to clot in the wrong places, including the placenta. It could lead to recurrent pregnancy loss if left untreated. When the test came back positive, she asked me if anyone in my maternal family had been diagnosed with it. I said no, but she told me to ask my mother when she was last tested. I started taking daily low-dose aspirin and twice-weekly heparin injections. It was a painful and scary process, but I was determined to do whatever it took. And to my surprise, I got pregnant naturally the first month I tried. At 20 weeks, the ultrasound technician told me it was a girl. She was perfect, measuring strong. I was overjoyed, but I also knew that I had to face my family with the truth. The week before my mother's birthday, I went back to Dr. Sullivan and asked her for a letter. I told her, my mother has called me weak my whole life. I want a document she can't ignore. Dr. Sullivan was quiet for a moment, then she said, Norma, this syndrome is heritable. Whatever your mother says, it's not your fault. Your body has been trying to tell you something for a long time. She gave me the letter 3 days before the dinner. It was on her letterhead, with her phone number at the bottom and a copy of the lab results attached. But what I didn't know at the time was that my father had his own secret. In 2021, the same year Leo and I started IVF, my father, Henry, sent a cheek swab to a genealogy company. He told my mother he read about it in a magazine at the barbershop, and she just rolled her eyes. 4 years later, in 2025, he received an email from a woman named Isabella. She was 42 years old and lived in San Diego. She had been raised in foster care, and her biological mother had died in childbirth. The DNA test showed that she was my father's daughter. My father sat in his office for hours, thinking about what to do. He had known about Isabella's existence for a long time but had promised her mother to keep it a secret. He wrote back to her, saying, Isabella, I've always known. I've been sending you support checks all these years, even though your foster mother returned them. He met Isabella for the first time in a coffee shop in San Diego in early 2027. He brought a small photo album that he had kept hidden in his desk for 30 years. It had pictures of Isabella as a child, sent to him by her foster mother. Isabella was a social worker, and she had also been diagnosed with antiphospholipid syndrome after 2 miscarriages. She told my father that it was hereditary and that he should tell me. My father then told her about my mother's birthday dinner and the letter I was going to bring. He said he had been waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Isabella agreed to come but said she would wait outside until he decided to let her in. A few days before the dinner, my father met Leo at a coffee shop. He gave Leo a manila envelope and asked him not to tell me yet. He said that Isabella would be parked 2 blocks away on the night of the dinner and that Leo should make sure I read my doctor's letter first. He also gave Leo a key to his office desk, where the photo album was kept. On the day of the dinner, I put on a navy blue dress that didn't hug my belly. I packed the letter from Dr. Sullivan, a small bottle of aspirin, my phone, keys, and a piece of dark chocolate. My aunt, Grace, rode in the back seat with me. She was quiet on the way there, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said, Tonight, I have to apologize to everyone in that house, but I can't say it yet. When we arrived at my parents' house, my mother opened the door. She was wearing a camel-colored cashmere cardigan, and she kissed the air near my cheek. She glanced at my belly but said nothing. The dining room was set with a beautiful walnut table and 12 chairs. The chargers were a family heirloom, and the linen napkins had the initial V embroidered in gold. The centerpiece was a wreath of white candles. My sister, Amelia, and her husband, Ryan, were there with their 3 children. My grandmother, Mildred, sat at the head of the table in a purple dress, her hands folded in her lap. My mother raised her glass and said, To my real family. May we always be blessed with health and happiness. My father didn't lift his glass, and neither did Aunt Grace or Grandma Mildred. I lifted my glass of pomegranate juice halfway. Amelia noticed and asked, Norma, are you driving? I looked at my mother and said, No, Amelia. I'm pregnant. 22 weeks. The room went silent for a few seconds. Then my mother said, Oh, dear. Let's hope this one doesn't turn out like you. My father added, You always manage to disappoint. I felt my daughter kick inside me, and I put my hands on my belly. I said, Mom, Dad, before we have cake, I have something to read. My mother tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. I started reading the letter from Dr. Sullivan. Mrs. Thompson was diagnosed with antiphospholipid syndrome in 2026. This is an autoimmune disorder that causes recurrent pregnancy loss when untreated. With proper treatment, Her current pregnancy is progressing normally at 22 weeks. I paused and looked up. This means I was never weak. I had a medical condition that no one bothered to diagnose for years. I continued reading. Antiphospholipid syndrome shows strong familial patterns. It's strongly advised that all first-degree female relatives get tested. My grandmother, Mildred, put her hand on her chest. She had known about this for a long time. She said, "Victoria, I drove you to the hospital in 1992 when you tested positive. You were on heparin for a while but then stopped because you were scared." My mother's face turned white. She tried to deny it, but the evidence was right in front of her. Just then, my father stood up. He pulled out a manila envelope from his jacket and said, "Norma, the words I said earlier were a lie. I rehearsed them with your mother so she wouldn't suspect what's coming." He opened the envelope and laid out the contents on the table: money order stubs, a Mother's Day card from Isabella, and a photo of her as a 12-year-old. He said, "Before I met your mother, I had a daughter with another woman. Her name is Isabella, and she's been living in San Diego. I've been supporting her all these years." Amelia stood up, shocked. "Mom, you knew about this?" My mother didn't say a word. Aunt Grace then stood up and brought out a small photo album. She said, "Victoria, the cardigan you sent to Norma in 2025? You also sent one to Isabella in 1995. I drove you to the post office that day." I opened the album and saw a picture of Isabella wearing the same oatmeal-colored cashmere cardigan. My father then said, "Isabella is outside. I've been waiting for the right moment to bring her in." My mother stood up and said, "Henry, you can't bring that woman into this house." But my grandmother, Mildred, said, "Victoria, sit down." And to my surprise, my mother sat down. My father went to the door and opened it. Isabella was standing there, wearing a gray coat and holding a small bag. She walked in and looked at me. "You're Norma," she said. I said, "You're Isabella." We hugged, and I felt a connection I had never felt before. Isabella then took out a folder from her bag. It had her medical records, showing her diagnosis of antiphospholipid syndrome. She said, "Norma, we've both been carrying this burden without knowing each other. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Amelia then stood up and said, "Mom, you knew about this condition and how it could affect us. You let us believe Norma was just weak for all these years." I'm done. My mother sat there, silent, as the truth finally came out. I looked at my father, Isabella, and my family, and I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. In the days that followed, my father filed for separation from my mother. He started therapy, recommended by Isabella. Amelia took her oldest daughter, Lily, to Dr. Sullivan for testing. Lily's test came back negative, but Amelia decided that all her daughters would be tested as they got older. I named my daughter Isabella Joy. Isabella for the sister I never knew I had, and Joy because she brought so much hope into our lives. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from my mother. It was short and to the point. "Norma, I tested positive for antiphospholipid syndrome in 1992. I was scared, so I stopped the treatment. When you had your first miscarriage, I saw myself in you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know that I know what I did." I didn't reply right away. I put the letter in the walnut box that my grandmother had given me when I was a child. It already had the letter from Dr. Sullivan, my father's manila envelope, and a note with Isabella's address. As I stood in my daughter's nursery, looking at the framed photo of my father, Isabella, Leo, and me, I knew that the truth had finally set us free. No longer would I be called weak. My daughter would grow up knowing all her names and everyone she came from, and she would never be made to feel less than because of someone else's fear.